Hey everyone, it's your girl Maddie here, aka Beaver Mosh, and today I am joined by Alex from Vile Rites, whose new record, Senescence, coming out next week, August 16th, off of Carbonized Records. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today. How are we doing?
Absolutely. Pretty good, pretty good. Just one pretty close to the release and just getting
Yeah.
stoked to unleash it.
Yeah, one week. How does that lead up feel?
Pretty good. I mean, honestly, luckily we recorded in like at the end of March,
Hmm.
and it's been a pretty busy year. So like it's gone by pretty quick, like I
Yeah.
feel like for album turnaround, like all things considered, that's pretty quick. So felt pretty lucky to, be working with Carbonized, and we kind of had that figured out before we recorded. So so yeah, luckily there wasn't too much of a like miserable wait time of being like sitting on the album for a year or something like that. So things started
Hmm.
moving pretty quickly, and but yeah, just super excited to get it out and like, get the full thing out in the world because like the singles, I love the singles and everything, but I tend to be a full album kind of guy. So
Yeah.
I'm
It's
excited
not
for people.
a single is not the full experience. You need to have it all in context.
Yeah, it's like it's not an album full of singles. It's definitely like a full
Yeah.
like journey. So I'm excited for people to be able to like digest the whole thing.
Yeah, and I know for this record, you're taking a lot of inspiration from natural events, and you wanted to kind of simulate that into the music for the listener. How do you go about interpreting these phenomena into metal music? How do you find success communicating this?
I mean, I guess that'd be up to the listener to decide, but or like if I was successful,
Yeah.
but I guess the main thing is, I spend a lot of time, I think all of us kind of do, spend a lot of time in, our free time, like hiking, camping, doing stuff like that. So really it's like, a lot of times it'll kind of go in the opposite way where it's like I'll be writing a song, and that will make me like, some motif in the song will like make me think of something, and then I'll kind of like research that topic and explore it further,
Yeah.
and kind of try to incorporate that into like the lyrical content.
Sure.
So kind of it goes both ways, but it's like a lot of it is for the lyrical content, and it's like this song that I created, like what kind of mood or what kind of place does it put me in, and that's kind of how I like approach the lyrics. So it's a little bit of both, but I personally draw a lot of inspiration from my travels and wanderings and stuff like that. Um, so that just makes its way into the music subconsciously, I suppose, like in terms of the actual music part.
Yeah, for sure. Now, interestingly enough, when you started this project, it was more of a thrash thing. Am I correct? Like, and you have a background in thrash. You've been in other bands that kind of lean in that direction. How did this project eventually morph into like this cerebral progressive death metal sort of entity?
Um, yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, in high school, I started a thrash band, or a couple of us started a thrash band. Uh, Me, this guy Tyler Becker, who plays in Toxic Holocaust now,
Hmm.
drums for them. Alex Huddleston, who plays in a band called Tithe now, and then another friend that was no longer playing music really. But it was kind of like a power thrash band called Gladius, and in the wake of that, like we stopped playing, and I think it was like 2016, and in the wake of that. Me and the drummer Tyler started this Vile Rites project, and I wanted to do like a thrash band, kind of along the lines of like Toxic, Coroner, um, just like the tech thrash classics,
Yeah.
and I kind of, I was incorporating a lot of weird timing stuff, and I think like on the inside, I really wanted it to be really aggressive and like almost like pretty much death metal, but like wasn't quite there yet, I guess. And when I moved down to Santa Rosa, I actually joined a band called Tressalence, which is just like balls out tech thrash, like not constant movement on the fretboard kind of thing. And I was like, huh, like this is kind of scratching that itch. And I'm kind of feeling like I don't want to be like writing riffs and like having to decide which band to like put it towards. So I was like, I'm just going to get a 7 string and see what that does for me. And then I started write. I like trashed all the songs that I had before and just like started completely from scratch. And this is kind of what came out.
Yeah, well, props to you for just like kind of not putting yourself in kind of just a bubble and like letting yourself kind of develop organically and just seeing where this project goes and letting it happen.
Totally. Yeah, it's never
Yeah.
really like it's definitely never been my goal to like try to appease a specific crowd
Mhm.
necessarily, but which in the long run, who knows if that'll be a good or bad thing, but like, it's like one of those things where I definitely wanted to, after having, played for, since high school and playing in bands and stuff, I was like, I just wanted to do something that I want to do. This is the music I want to hear. And it was a challenge to find band members, but since we're a 3 piece, I only had to find 2 people, so that worked out pretty pretty well, I guess, for me.
Yeah, and you talk about not wanting to play to a certain audience. Well, I mean, there's plenty of metalheads who are, very broad in what they listen within metal, but there are people that like people that are into Annihilator and Corner are a different crowd than people that are into like prog death, which is what you're playing now. So you are, in a sense, playing to a different audience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, but I guess my point was like it wasn't necessarily like I set out to be like, okay, I want to get in with this crowd
Yeah,
or that,
yeah.
you know. So it's like, I think people have definitely pointed out like, oh, like I hear the like Coroner, Annihilator, Oblivion kind of shit going on in here. Um, and I've always kind of embraced that. It's like, yeah, I definitely, all of us have like a thrash background. So it's kind of like makes sense that it would work its way into this like kind of amalgamation of genres.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it makes sense. I think you can draw that line and it makes the logic works. Senescence. I kind of looked what that word up before we started this interview, and it refers to aging or growing old or just like life naturally going into decay. And I'm wondering how does that apply to the themes of this record? What does that symbolize to you?
So it's actually kind of funny because like I was saying, I when writing lyrics, I tend to like listen to the song and be like, okay, like close my eyes. What does this
Yeah.
make me picture? So the song Senescent, there's that like opening riff that's very like crawly to me, and I was like chatting with my bass player, and we were like, oh, it's like walking along the ocean floor or something like that. So we were like had this like I was like, oh, maybe we'll like do some kind of like weird abysmal plane kind of idea like about the oceans. And then I watch a lot of like nature docs and shit like that,
Of course.
and I watched one about like the like octopuses basically, and super interesting, and it piqued my interest. And basically like I found out that when octopuses reproduce, uh they basically go down in like a crevice or whatever and like lay their eggs, and then the female will like tend to the eggs until she's dead. Basically she just uh
Hmm.
doesn't eat, doesn't do anything, just basically just dies there, and then the eggs are the hatch and the babies go off and they're kind of like wandering adrift by themselves. um and actually, so I was like, oh, this is a really cool like symbol for kind of like the cycle of life, and like this idea of like birth, death, and rebirth, and stuff like that. So I started doing a bunch of research on octopuses, and I actually learned that word because they use that in reference to when she lays her eggs. It's like she becomes senescent. Um, and I was like, wow, that's a really cool word. And
Yeah.
I did the same thing, and I was like researching what that meant, and I was like, man, this is really interesting because it's kind of like I think it's interesting because it in biology, it's kind of like when cells are no longer able to reproduce.
Sure.
And I kind of look at that as like this, again, like this symbol for like, kind of like the multiple parts of a whole. It's like we think of ourselves as like a singular creature, or like our pets as a singular animal, but really it's like this huge collection of cells and bacteria, and
Yeah.
you know there's a lot of things at work that we're not even aware of inside ourselves. So it's like that cell death is kind of like the parts of a whole dying, and the whole is dying because of that. And you can kind of look at like the entire world like that. It's like you have all these parts that are in like this balance,
Yeah.
and as parts die, the whole thing kind of goes downhill. So that was kind of the whole idea. Like when I read that definition and those words, it started to like mull over in my mind of what I wanted the theme for the album to be. Um, and it's kind of like this idea of death and rebirth, and like you know being forced to like suffer through that cycle, or embrace it, basically.
You know, you are definitely not the first band I've had on the show to kind of express this interest or fascination in just like scientific processes. And I think there is something about like biology that just works so well with metal music, and just like just like how living things work is intriguing to a listener who's into music about body parts.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
it's I didn't want to. I've never wanted to write about like gore, or
Yeah.
Satan or whatever. But it's like I think these things, if used as a metaphor, sometimes are like just as like, I don't know if brutal is the right word, but kind of like you know um, they make an impact in a profound way if you start to think about it, because it's just what's happening around us on the planet, and it's like this is just everyday life stuff. But if you stop and think about it, it's like really beautiful and violent, and everything. It's just like
Mhm.
it's it. I think it's what music is about. It's what art is about. In general.
With this record, and with your previous EP as well, you worked with the legendary Greg Wilkinson at Earhammer, and I'm wondering what was that experience like, and what do you think he's able to bring out of your sound that maybe you couldn't yourself?
Oh man, it's funny because for the EP, that's when my relationship with him started, or our relationship. Like, I basically just shot him an email. I actually was looking for, places to record. I was listening to bands that were, located within, a certain radius of us, and like seeing whose recordings I liked, and who was on what. And actually, another Santa Rosa local band, Baron Altar,
Mhm.
is a really cool band. We play with them a lot, and I was listening to their EP or record or something, and I was like, "Man, this sounds really good. These guys are from Santa Rosa. I wonder where they went." And I looked up, and it was Greg, and I was like, "Oh, sick!" And it's just was reading through all the albums he's been a part of, and I was just like, "Okay, this is our guy. I'm gonna hit him up." So I shot him an email, and I almost felt like I was like submitting to like a label or something like that. I was like, are you down to record us? Like, are you down to work with us? And and he was like, yeah, totally. And the EP was during like the COVID times, basically.
Mhm.
And so we kind of got like um a little bit of like a like Greg Light experience, because we couldn't all be in there at once. We were trying to be safe and stuff. So it was just like whoever was recording that day was in there. I think we had like during drums we were all down there, but yeah, we wanted to keep safe and stuff. So it was just like one on one, which was cool as well because we got to know each other a little bit better. And and yeah, he just is like was super pro that first time, and created. And something I've always wanted to like avoid with this band is kind of like that like really sterile tech death sound,
Yeah.
because because I knew we were going to be doing like very technical music, and I didn't really want to like get sorted into like, oh, this is like one of those studio like Pro Tools kind of bands, which no, whatever. Like, who am I to say what anyone should do or shouldn't do? But that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be all analog. So like, we've actually made a joke between us, like, yeah, this is like analog tech death, is like sometimes. So I told Greg that, and I obviously listening to his style, it's like, or his, the bands he's recorded and stuff. Like, I knew it wasn't going to sound sterile, and it was going to sound really open and cool. So the EP, we were in and out in like four days in the studio, I think, and then like mixing mastering day. So it was really kind of rushed, and I didn't want to spend too much money. But this time, um, I've gotten to know Greg a little bit better, so there's like a level of comfort there now. So we did like 10 days in the studio and really got to like nerd out, and
Hell yeah.
had Greg like pulling out all the tricks and like helping us achieve, like, we'd be like, okay, we want to do like this like whooshy effect here and like this and this, and he's like, all right, like let's get this, and like totally helping us like to accomplish, especially like those like lush effects and kind of the more like feely parts of the album. Like, he totally helped create those textures and stuff that we were using in ways that I never would have
Yeah.
imagined or thought of.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I mean, you can hear it. At least when I mean, I've heard the record. You can hear that there is like that professional touch, making it sound spacious in a way that like only a great producer can make a record sound.
Totally. It's
Yeah,
just that feeling of like, when you listen to it with good headphones or whatever, it's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm like immersed in this.
yeah,
That's really important to me, because it's like, and the dynamics of it and stuff. Because it's like, obviously, I listen to tons of like 70s prog and like stuff
yeah.
like that. Those albums from that period of time are so dynamic and like so much headroom and like breathe like so well, that like I kind of wanted to bring that into our death metal album in some
Yeah.
aspect.
That's a good segue because I wanted to talk about in the promotional packaging I received for the record. It says it's listed for fans of like 70s psych, prog, experimental music. It's not just for metalheads. And I'm wondering, is there any key records or artists of that experimental era that you're paying heed to? Maybe something like Tangerine Dream or Can. Is that what we're talking about here?
Of course, it's like the krautrock stuff, and like Gentle Giant is like huge for me. Like, that's one of my favorite bands. And then like of course, like Pink Floyd, specifically like David Gilmour's like
Hmm.
style and stuff like that, and the guitar playing aspect. And it's not really like, I wouldn't say it's like there's specific records, but I think there's something about that like era to me that's like special,
Hmm.
because I feel like when you listen to those albums, like especially like some of the stuff from like the like Canterbury scene, like like Gentle Giant and stuff like that, and then like these like krautrock bands and like the Bay Area psych and stuff like that. It's like they were just throwing shit at the wall, you know what I mean? And it's like they weren't afraid to just like put like 5 minutes of dogs barking, you know what I mean? Like like
Yeah.
Pink Floyd. And it's like, so I guess I want to embrace, like, when I write music, I want to try to embrace that like idea of like we're not here to like do something, we're not here to like replicate anything. We want to create, like, put ideas out that you know we think are original. Like, nothing's original, but it's like what we are doing our best to be original, and like throwing ideas at the wall that maybe you wouldn't necessarily associate with like a death metal record.
I'm a big fan of that era too. When you look at stuff like, I don't know, Amon Duel
Oh
or
yeah.
artists like that. Or even like Kraftwerk. There's such an emphasis on texture and just letting music unfurl slowly, like Keanu would do these 23-minute just impressionistic pieces that I think got lost within. I don't know if you can consider canned popular music, but
Yeah, yeah,
stuff that was like sold in record stores in the 80s, where the 80s kind of now the focus is radio songs having a tricky, kind of clicky track. And
yeah.
not saying that there wasn't underground music in the 80s, there was, but even like stuff like that, it moved back into like the post-punk direction. It was still more very much like a quick
More
single kind of stuff.
digestible bits.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad that there's an interest in that exploration again in music.
Yeah,
Like,
hopefully it speaks to people on a wider level, but like,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it's like, like the band Nectar. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's
Hmm.
kind of a, I think, a super underrated band out of the '70s that's just like kind of like Pink Floydy and stuff like that, and yeah, just like bands like that, and yeah, there's just a ton of those like I'll just get on like Spotify like wormholes of like related artists, and I'll just be like clicking through shit and be like, oh wow, this is like super weird, and I don't know if I'll revisit this, but I really like the fact that someone did this. You know what I mean? And even like
Yeah,
Rush, like, obviously that's like when people think of prog, that's like something that comes to mind, and it's like even with the album layout, we're like, okay, let's put all the short songs on one side and the long ones on the other, and like kind of how like Caress of Steel or 2112 is laid out.
yeah,
uh, and we've kind of always, we've definitely toyed with the idea of being like, okay, let's do like a single side and then just like a one song side on our next album. So I guess we'll see to see how that pans out, but yeah, definitely like the longer song forms and stuff like that is something that we kind of just naturally do. We honestly
yeah.
try to do some shorter songs, but doesn't usually work out.
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted to ask you about it because it is something you do. It's a 45-minute album. It's only 5 tracks. You clearly like the longer track format, and I'm assuming the advantage to that is that it will just lets tracks really develop. Like take a longer trajectory. It isn't trying to get to somewhere too quickly. It takes its time, and sometimes that can be a disadvantage. Sometimes bands can just kind of it can go nowhere, but when it's done right, it can be very compelling.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we're shooting for, is like a movement. Each song is like
Yeah.
gets you from point A to point B, versus like we're at point A and we go to point B and then we return to point A. It's like it's more of a development throughout the song. And not to say that there's no like repetition or anything, but not a lot. But and I just tend to, when I'm writing like riffs and stuff, I just tend to be like, ooh, here's an idea. Ooh, here's an idea. And it's like, shit, how am I gonna like fit this into like one song? And or like risk, having multiple songs that are kind of like cut from the same cloth, and then risk kind of like having this repetitive like motif throughout multiple songs,
Hmm.
which is cool too. But yeah, it's just the longer format just tends to be easier for me to write that way for some reason.
I think of like a band like I don't know, like Symphony X, who is known for writing these long, epic, you know,
Yeah.
odysseys. And an onlooker might be like, why would you want to listen to like a 20-minute song? And I'm like, I'm not really. I'm sitting down with my headphones and experiencing a record. So the track lengths are insignificant. It's all a piece. So whether it's like a bunch of shorter tracks or a few longer tracks, the experience is a whole movement for me. So like I don't know. I don't view just like putting a song on. It's like part of a whole piece. At least when bands who do pieces like that are typically looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, for example, like Opeth is like obviously a great example for like just the longest songs. Like,
Yeah.
I've, that's a big influence for us. And yeah, I mean, it's like as a listener, when I'm listening to like an Opeth album, it's like I could barely like name songs off the albums, because like I almost always just put on the whole album and like just listen to the whole thing. I don't really like think about it as like, oh, there's this song, and then this song. It's like, oh, this is just like a break between,
Yeah.
like, just like a small break between movements within a single work that is
Yeah.
Morning Rise or whatever. So that's kind of, as a listener, I kind of enjoy that um, kind of like almost story arc to an album. And so I guess that's kind of just naturally what I set out to achieve, or just ended up doing naturally.
Cool. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know you have other chats to have today, but will there be live performances kind of in support of the record?
Absolutely. We actually we're doing like a release show in our hometown, Santa Rosa, on the day of the release, which is, I think, is kind of fun. It's hard to make that happen usually.
Hmm.
So that's, you know, 1 week from today. And then yeah, we actually don't have any like more tour. We just got off of a tour like right before the album, like as the singles were coming out and stuff.
Sure.
We did a West Coast run, but we're basically just focusing on getting outside of our territory that we've kind of stuck to. Like, you know, we'd love to make it out to the East Coast and you know, the Southwest and Middle America. We're just trying to spread out a little bit, you know. So I can say that hopefully you will see some extended runs in other parts of the country, and hopefully internationally in 2025, on this, or on this album cycle in general. So we do we are voraciously trying to get out there and play for people, because we're definitely
Awesome.
a live band. Like, you know, the live thing for us is kind of a different, you know, experience. You know, we definitely throw weird shit into the middle of like transitions of songs, and so it's definitely not like what listening to the album necessarily. So you get a different flavor every time we play, probably.
Awesome. Well, for everyone watching at home, look out for the record coming out next Friday. If the Vile Rites playing a show in your area, as we have got hinted at, go see them. Thank you, Alex, for joining me.
Absolutely.
And thank you always to my patrons. And of course, my name is Maddie, aka Beaver Mush, and I'm out of here.